Hello my lovelies and welcome back to my channel. I'm Heather and this is the happenings with H.A.P. We are currently in the middle of a snowstorm in New York City. So I am filming at 6:50 in the morning. This is the second video I've been filming. This is gonna be my January reading wrap up. I ended up reading a lot of books this month. It was a very interesting reading month. I will say it was not my favorite reading month I've ever had. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button down below and give me a like or comment or dislike, as some people now are giving me dislikes because I'm asking for them. Whatever, I'm here for it, it's fine. So that's it, we're gonna get into my January reading wrap up. So hopefully it won't run too long. The first book I finished in January was Kingdom of the Wicked by Kerri Maniscalco, which is the first book in, I believe, a trilogy? I'm not sure if it's going to be a trilogy or quartet, but this is her follow-up series to the Stalking Jack the Ripper series, which I absolutely adored. And I will say, this book left me a little disappointed, but I don't fully understand why. This book follows Amelia and her family and twin sister Vittoria, who are all Trilogy, which is Italian witches, and they live among humans, but obviously humans can't know about who they are for fear of, witch hunters and being killed and all that. And on the island they live, there are a bunch of witch families, so it's kind of like an unknown known secret that there are a lot of witches in this area. And unfortunately, there have been murders of young women in these witch families, and one of the murderers happens to be Amelia's own twin sister Vittoria. Amelia is actually the one that ends up finding her sister's body, and she sees a man like hovering over the body tasting the blood of her sister, so she's obviously weirded out and is not sure who the murderer is but wants to get to the bottom of it. She actually attempts to summon a demon in order to help her with this, but she accidentally summons a prince of hell, Wrath, and through not knowing her incantations correctly, she accidentally makes a pact with Wrath to be tied to her forever. So he's understandably upset. Now, because of the way this pact works, he has to do everything he can to protect her. In order to make the best of a bad situation, she enlists his help in order to find her sister's murderer. Much like in Stalking Jack the Ripper, this kind of goes from an enemies to friends to lovers type of trope, which I'm always here for in young adult fiction. And I like the character of Wrath, and I enjoyed Amelia, but I did not enjoy Amelia as much of as a character as I did Audrey Rose. And that's the unfortunate thing, is that I couldn't help but compare the two type of books because they're both kind of centering around mysteries. The main character is trying to solve a mystery with someone she doesn't really like at first, but she's starting to kind of like later on. So it does follow a lot of the same beats as Stalking Jack the Ripper, but I just didn't think it was done as well. And it really bothered me. As I was reading it, I was hoping, I kept hoping I would love it more. I think I just didn't love Amelia as a main character as much, like I said, as much as Audrey Rose, but also stuff just happens. Like, they'll be transported to like hell and then back again within like a page. I was listening to the audiobook, so I kept rewinding and being like, did I miss a step somewhere? And I didn't. It's just kind of how the narrative goes. It's very quick in some ways and slow in others. It just kind of jumps around a lot. I really enjoyed seeing all the different Prince of Hells and all their different type of personalities. I've only ever been really exposed to those types of a character in the Shadowhunter series, and these characters are much different. What was weird to me was the kind of insidiousness of these literal demons and princes of hell in this historical area. Like, I'm not 100% sure. I might have missed it. I don't know when this is supposed to take place. I'm guessing the late 1800s, early 1900s. I'm not 100% on that. Some of the clothing is mentioned, which kind of I tried to pinpoint based on my knowledge of historical clothing, but I was still kind of confused. I thought it was 18th or 19th century, but then I thought it might be earlier than that. It just kind of didn't make a lot of sense to me, but that could have been that I just completely missed the time period mentioned. But at the same time, like, I didn't really get a sense of the atmosphere and like when this was supposed to take place. Unlike in Stalking Jack the Ripper, which was very specific about the time period and it lived in the time period that it was written in, whereas this just kind of feels timeless in a way, but in a way that just was kind of confusing to me. And we do find out the murderer in this first book, but I kind of ended up seeing it coming a little bit, and that was a little disappointing. I didn't see it coming as much in Stalking Jack the Ripper until things started to fall into place, and this was just like, oh yeah, he did it. The second book in the series comes out this year, and I do want to read it because the ending of this book, I was like, oh, I didn't expect that coming at all, and now I'm very curious of where this is going to go. I do remember not loving every single book in the Stalking Jack the Ripper series, but the whole ended up being better than the sum of its parts, and I'm hoping that that is going to be the same for Kingdom of the Wicked. I gave it a 3.5 stars. Like, I enjoyed it, but it was kind of a letdown as to what I was expecting, because I had been wanting to read this since it was first released in October. It unfortunately felt a little flat for me. From what I usually give 5 stars for, it didn't hit that note for me, but I do want to read the second book in the series because I'm hoping the second book is going to be better, and based on the ending, I'm very much looking forward to what the relationship between Emilia and Wrath is going to be going forward, and if it will be something that will end up changing. I'm not 100% if it will. The next book on my list was The Duke and I by Julia Quinn, which is the first book in the Bridgerton series. So this was not on my TBR. If you watched my TBR video, you knew this was not going to be on there. This was just something I had to read after binging the series in literally half a day. I finally ended up watching it during January, and yeah, I had to read the book. Like, I needed more of that fix because it's only like an 8-episode series. And I will be having a video of the Bridgerton series, but I'm currently working on a new format, which is taking a little bit longer to film and edit. So that is coming. I promised it in another video, and it is coming. Regardless, this was a surprise book for me just because I was like, I have to read it after watching that season. I had to know what the differences were, and this was only okay. I don't want to reveal too much. This book does follow the main story beats of the Bridgerton series if you've watched it pretty faithfully, though it is more condensed to just Daphne, Simon, Anthony, and Violet, Daphne and Anthony's mother. Whereas the series does kind of cover more characters and is fleshed out a bit more. This is very insular, but a lot of the main story beats are there. For reference sake, Daphne is a member of the Bridgerton family, and she is finally out in society and is on a quest via her mother as well as herself to find a good marriage match because her father had died. So the better match she can make, the better things will be for her and her full family as well as her younger sisters as they age up and marry out as well. Fortunately, because there are 8 Bridgerton siblings and the oldest are all boys, they don't have to worry about like poverty in the same way as like, say, some of Jane Austen characters do, but it's still beneficial to have a good marriage match. And it's been a few seasons and Daphne is still not married. There really aren't many interesting prospects, and she meets up with Anthony's friend Simon, who is a duke who has just returned. They end up hitting it off, but Simon's caveat is he never wants to get married to anybody because he made this kind of promise to his father. They make this pact together that he will pretend to be courting Daphne so that people will leave him alone, and then more men will be interested in Daphne in return because she's with someone of such high station. But of course, as these things always go, they end up falling in love with each other. Like I said, if you've watched the Bridgerton series, these are the story beats, and I'm sorry if I spoiled it for you, but that's pretty much what happens. And obviously what this series is known for is its very erotic graphic scenes. And there aren't as many. It took actually a while for it to happen. There aren't as many as the series itself would have you believe, but they were pretty steamy. They were fine. Like, I've definitely read more detailed, but it was like a fun little fluffy read. And as of reading the first one, I do want to read the rest because since I like the show, I want to see where the show's going to be going, but I don't see the real hype for this series after reading this book. Maybe the others get better. I know this has like a huge cult following. I had never heard of the series before the TV show ended up being premiered, but I enjoyed it, but it was definitely not one of my favorites. I gave it like a 3 stars. It was fine, and I read it pretty quickly, but I've definitely read better romances in books that aren't labeled as romance, and even those that are. And I've also read similar caliber erotic scenes, so it's not like that was anything special either. Like, it was a fun little fluffy book. I had to just see where the show came from, mostly in preparation for making that video, but also I was like in a very much a Bridgerton like kind of way for like a few days, so I had to satisfy that. But it was fine. It just wasn't my favorite book I've ever read. I'll read the rest, but I'm not gonna like hurry up and do it and like binge them all. So yeah. The next book on my list was Roman and Jewel by Dana L. Davis. To be honest, this was one of my favorites that I read this month. This one was a new release and it didn't completely live up to my expectations. I gave it a 4 stars though, and I really did enjoy myself. I just wanted a little bit more, and I'll go into why. This book follows Jersey James, who is a very young musical theater actress. She's 16 and she's from New Jersey. She ends up getting her first big break by being the standby for Jewel, which is a Juliet character in this big new Broadway hip-hop production called Roman and Jewel, which is based off of Romeo and Juliet. The caveat is that while she was having her auditions, the creator, writer, director, everyone involved thought that she was the perfect girl for the role because she was the person that embodied the role the best. However, because it is kind of like Shakespeare and it's an unknown property and not sure how they're gonna do it, the producers wanted a big name to play Jewel instead. So that big name is Cindy, who I guess is supposed to be like a Sia type of character. I'm not 100%. She's under a Beyonce, let's just say that, but she's, you know, famous enough to have just a first name. Jersey is obviously upset by this because literally they tell her, we watch the audition process happen and they tell her like she is actually what they envisioned the role to be. Like she sings it perfectly, she acts it perfectly. There's everything about her is Jewel, but because of the gods that be, a la the producers, they have to go with another choice, but they do offer her the standby role. And she's upset, but her Aunt Carla, who is like an amazing side character in this book, I loved her Auntie Carla, convinces her that like this is Broadway. You were only 16, you are making your Broadway debut. This is a huge deal. You should be happy that you get to do this. And for those that don't know, standby and understudies are different things in the Broadway community. Understudies are basically chorus members that will learn lead roles and other roles and fill in for sicknesses and stuff like that. Whereas a standby is somebody that usually only knows 1 or 2 specific roles, and that's all they do. They have no involvement in the chorus or ensemble of the production, and they're literally on call just in case something happens to the main person. And because the Jewel character in this is being played by like a superstar, that would be the type of a role that would have a standby that's literally there to stand by. Like they don't really rehearse too much with the rest of the cast, but they have to know everything. And literally if the cast member breaks a foot, they have to basically go out there and do it immediately. That's one thing that Jersey doesn't really like about it, is that she kind of just always has to sit in a chair and watch everything happen. She doesn't really get to be involved with the production physically as much as everyone else. She ends up like taking her lot and understanding that this is a big deal regardless, and she's gonna make the best of it. And during the first rehearsal that she is able to attend, she meets Zeppelin Reed, who is playing Roman, and the two immediately have chemistry, and it is palpable. Unfortunately, Cindy also has a thing for Zeppelin, as does literally the rest of the female members of the cast, but he kind of only has eyes for Jersey. Zeppelin is 19, so it's not entirely off-putting of an age gap, but it's a little weird because she is only 16, so take that with a grain of salt for what you will. But it didn't really bother me unless I actually sat and thought about it. But yeah, Cindy is unfortunately an extremely demanding leading lady diva and doesn't like to do a lot of rehearsal. She has the cast sign NDA agreements, and the director and the writer are all kind of just like having to grin and bear it because of the fact that they wouldn't have been able to put on this production without her. During a rehearsal, Cindy decides that she's just gonna go outside and sign some autographs for fans. So Jersey decides to like come out of her shell and be like, I'll step in, I know the choreography, I know the music, and Jersey's basically a prodigy because she does. The whole time someone was filming, and this performance ends up being posted on the internet, as well as rehearsal footage of Cindy singing terribly, falling on her ass and all that. So there's this big juxtaposition of like this mega superstar looking terrible and this new ingenue unknown like basically killing it. They end up having this kind of rivalry where Cindy is very much into Zeppelin, and she basically tells Jersey to back off, and it's this whole big thing of kind of unnecessary drama. Not even kind of unnecessary drama. It's unfortunate. That kind of drama was the thing that really kind of made this book not be a full 5 stars for me. Like I could totally take the fact that Cindy is this villain, she's this bitch of a diva. Cool. But at the end of the novel, she's given this bit of a redemption arc of like where she was coming from this whole time. And I'll be honest, it kind of drew the book down in ratings for me. Like, I didn't need that. Kind of build up this character that we're supposed to not be rooting for this entire time. And she does some very terrible, terrible things and manipulative and kind of psychotic, crazy ex-girlfriend type of stuff. But we're just supposed to feel bad for her because, you know, she's famous and she doesn't understand why Zeppelin would be into Jersey and all that. And it's just like, why did we need to have this redemption arc for this character? Not everyone gets a redemption arc in real life. Some people are just actually terrible people. So that was kind of disappointing for me. This is getting a lot of mixed reviews, and a big part of it is the insta-love between Jersey and Zeppelin. That didn't bother me so much. It's supposed to be Romeo and Juliet retelling type of the thing, so that makes sense to me. Of course, we're supposed to be an insta-love. Does Jersey get a little obsessed about him? Yeah, but again, she's also 16 years old, and I know at 16 I was that way a lot with a lot of people in my high school, so I totally get that. It's just kind of the way it is. So the insta-love didn't bother me. Will they last forever? Probably not, but that's fine too. I did love what little glimpses we got into like the way a production is run professionally and the New York theater scene. Jersey describes her first time, I think it's her first time seeing Phantom of the Opera, which was her first Broadway show, and that was also my first Broadway show. And her driving into the city and going past all the Broadway billboards before you get into the tunnel, and like that was such a sense memory scene for me because the first time I went to New York City, that's exactly what I first noticed and how I felt. This is very much a kind of love letter book to the musical theater industry and Broadway. All little references, all of the little things that are brought up that are very specific to the area, very specific to New York and landmarks and stuff like that. And that really, really just brought something home to me. And like I felt an affinity for this book immediately, especially after reading that scene. Like it was so, I want to share it with like all my musical theater friends because I think that they would really enjoy it. The main thing of giving the villain a redemption arc was really the only thing that really brought it down for me. And I also, of course, wanted to know what ends up happening later. Like we do see the show go to the opening, but like what happens after that? And I wanted more. Maybe there'll be a sequel. Probably not. It is kind of, you know, encapsulated in its own one book world, and that's fine. I wanted a little bit more from it. And like I said, just that redemption arc, I just wasn't feeling just because I had already written this character off. I don't need to know her reasons because her reasons don't really mean anything for the type of things that she did. But I really enjoyed this one. I highly recommend this one a lot, especially if you are a Broadway lover. You'll really enjoy it too. And I'll be honest, I now want to see a production of Roman and Jewel as described in the book of what they were going to make because it sounded really, really cool. The next two books I read were two books in the Shadow and Bone trilogy by Leigh Bardugo, and they were Shadow and Bone and Siege and Storm. I did not get to read Rise and Ruin yet because I kind of ran out of time for the month. I can only fit in so many books in a month, and I don't want to give too much of a review of the series since I have one more book to read, but I'm enjoying it so far. This novel follows Alina, who is a member of the Ravka military, and her best friend Mal, and during this kind of outing into the Fold, which is this like place of darkness that has these dark creatures that has kind of like always existed in this universe, she ends up rescuing Mal by using powers that she didn't know she had. She is a sun summoner and has the power to summon the light of the sun, and that makes her a Grisha, which is a being that has powers that can control the different elements. She did not know that she had this power, and instantly she is whisked off to the little palace by the Darkling in order to be trained as a Grisha. And Alina just kind of is one of those shy, awkward people that just kind of wanted to live a normal life, and she's always had a thing for Mal, and she's actually an orphan along with Mal, so she's never known her family. She's never really known that much stability. So to be kind of thrust into this world and realizing that she has these magical powers and is essentially one of the most magical of the magical. So she is the chosen one, the one who's supposed to destroy the Fold and save Ravka. You know, it's the whole chosen one trope, and she doesn't always handle it well, and it takes her a very long time to end up finding her powers. The most interesting relationship besides her and Mal was her and the Darkling. It is very much an enemies to lovers to enemies type type of a pairing because they are so closely bonded, because they kind of are the duality of light and dark. And as he tells her many times, there is no one of even a Grisha that is as powerful or understands each other as much as they do. And they are inexplicably linked together. I'm not going to go into how that happens, but I'm very much enjoying this. I mostly read this in preparation for the series that is going to be on Netflix, but I will say I'm not hugely loving it. Like, I enjoy it. It's been averaging about a 3.5 stars, same as Kingdom of the Wicked. And I like the second book better. I like Siege and Storm better than Shadow and Bone because it did more stuff happen. You know, things were already explained, so we got to get into like the meat of the story. There's something lacking in it. And I know that this isn't everyone's favorite trilogy of League of Bardugos or favorite series, and that a lot of people like the Six of Crows series more. I'm hoping A, that I like the third book, but B, that, you know, when I get into Six of Crows, I'll love it as much as everyone else. And I'm hoping that it's not just these kind of expectations that were given to me that I have to deal with. These expectations that I've been reading about for years, and that might be why I didn't enjoy it as much as I had hoped to, but I did enjoy it. Like, I just don't really love Alina as a main character that much. She's fine, but the whole like, oh, I'm so average and I'm so weak and blah 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 kind of trope gets really old really fast, especially when you're like the chosen one. And she does start to own it in book 2, and I appreciate that, and she's starting to understand the kind of darkness that also resides in her, and I like that. So that's why I think I like Siege and Storm better than Shadow and Bone. But I'm curious of how this is going to end and how it is going to be connected into the greater Grisha-verse that are Leigh Bardugo's novels. So I am very much enjoying it. There's a whole bunch of side characters that are also really fun. It has some tragedy involved. What happens to Genya is so sad. But I also really enjoy the character of Nikolai. He's really has a very interesting backstory. So there's a lot of fun characters. I did enjoy the magic system and how this is supposed to be related to Russia as well as Russian folklore. There's a little bit of that involved in it, and I'm just curious where it's going to go. Like I said, I don't want to talk too much about it because I haven't read the series as a whole. So when I read the third book, I'll probably go in a bit more depth of the series so that I have a broader understanding of the beginning, middle, and the end. But I am enjoying it, and it's getting better as it gets along, so I'm really excited for that. I actually won't be reading Rise and Ruin until March because I have a different type of TBR set up, which you can watch that video here for my February TBR, but I'm very much looking forward to it. I hope the ending is going to be as good as the middle was, for sure. The last book I finished was my only reread, and that was The Book of Lost Things by John Connolly. I am not going to be getting into this as I have made an entire reading vlog and will do a separate solo review for this because it is my favorite book of all time, and it still is my favorite book of all time, so that is a spoiler alert for that review. Yeah, I really had a blast rereading this. There was so much I had forgotten, and I took notes the entire time I read it so that my review could be very much more in depth than some of these reviews sometimes are. But it was really fun to reread this and just see how twisted it was. And as you'll see in the reading vlog, there was a lot of things I was shocked by as I was reading it that I completely had forgotten about. I'm really glad I got to finally reread this. I'm super excited to film the actual review for it as well as release the reading vlog, so I hope you guys are too, because no one ever talks about this book in book 2 because it is an older novel, but I think more people should read it because I think a lot of people would really love it, and it does not get as much love as it should. So as I said, this was a lot of books I read this month. Not all of them were like my favorites, I will say that, but I did enjoy my reading. It just wasn't as many 5 stars or 4 stars as I thought that there would be, which that happens sometimes. It's fine, you know. You can't like every book you read, but I have been enjoying my reading. It just wasn't as up to par as it usually is for me. Have you guys read any of these books? If you have, please comment down below and let me know your thoughts, especially if they differ from mine, because I know some of these are like beloved books for some people. And with that, I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.